My name is Madison Davis, 28, and I never thought a broken leg would reveal the broken pieces of my family. When the doctor said I needed surgery, I called my parents. Their response: "You'll heal, but your sister's future is time-sensitive." They chose Haley's college orientation over my hospital bed, sending selfies from her dorm room while I stared at sterile walls. They had no idea what their abandonment would unleash, or how methodically I would make them understand my worth. If you're watching this, drop a comment telling me where you're from, hit subscribe, and stay for a story about drawing lines that should have been drawn years ago. Growing up in suburban Boston, our modest colonial house on Maple Street held 4 people, but only 3 who seemed to matter. My parents, Elizabeth and Robert Davis, built their world around their youngest daughter, my sister Haley. I was the reliable one, the self-sufficient one, the one who could handle things herself. This wasn't a role I chose, but one assigned to me from childhood. Mom worked as a high school English teacher, while Dad managed a regional bank branch. They weren't wealthy, but we lived comfortably in our middle-class neighborhood with good schools and tree-lined streets. From the outside, we looked like the perfect American family: 2 parents, 2 daughters, and a golden retriever named Scout. But inside those walls, the family dynamic told a different story. I learned early that being capable meant being overlooked. When I brought home straight, as my parents would nod and say, "Of course, that's what you always do." When Haley managed a B-, they'd celebrate with ice cream and praise. The pattern was subtle at first, small inequities that I convinced myself were normal. Maybe all older siblings felt this way. Maybe I was just being sensitive. But the evidence mounted year after year. When I was 12, I made the state science fair finals. The competition fell on the same weekend as Haley's soccer tournament. "We'll try to make it to your thing after her game," Mom promised. They never showed. I accepted my second-place ribbon alone while a teacher awkwardly took my photo. When I got home, the refrigerator already displayed 5 new photos of Haley in her uniform. "Your sister needs the encouragement," Dad explained when I finally gathered the courage to ask why they missed my event. "You're already confident and successful. She struggles more than you do." This became their constant refrain. Haley needed more attention, more support, more presence. My independence wasn't celebrated, it was exploited. It created the perfect cycle: the more self-sufficient I became, the less they felt I needed them, which pushed me to become even more self-reliant. My 13th birthday party was canceled when Haley came down with a mild cold. My 16th was postponed twice before being forgotten entirely because of Haley's drama club and dance recital. I stopped expecting celebration by my 18th birthday and made plans with friends instead. When Mom seemed surprised I wasn't having a family dinner, I reminded her of the pattern. She dismissed it entirely. "Don't be dramatic, Madison. We've always celebrated your birthdays." The gaslighting hurt more than the neglect. At least neglect acknowledged reality, even a painful one. Denial rewrote my experiences entirely. The pattern continued through high school, where I excelled academically and participated in debate team and environmental club. My parents attended exactly 2 of my debates in 4 years, both times because Haley happened to be between activities. They never missed a single one of her performances, even driving 3 hours to see her play a non-speaking role in a regional theater production. I adapted by building a life they weren't central to. I developed close friendships, found mentors and teachers, and spent time with my grandmother Elaine, my mother's mother, who saw the dynamic clearly. "Your parents mean well," Grandma Elaine would tell me during our Sunday afternoon teas at her small apartment across town. "But they've convinced themselves that love means giving the most attention to whoever struggles the most. It's not fair to you, sweetheart." Grandma Elaine became my safe harbor. In her small living room with crocheted blankets and the scent of lemon cookies, I felt seen in a way I never did at home. She attended my debate tournaments, helped me apply to colleges, and celebrated my achievements without qualification. When I left for college at Boston University, close enough to visit Grandma Elaine regularly, but far enough to escape my parents' orbit, the physical distance helped me gain perspective. I studied environmental engineering, found friends who valued me, and built a life based on reciprocity rather than constant giving. I thrived in this new environment where my competence was rewarded rather than taken for granted. After graduation, I secured a position at a respected environmental consulting firm in Boston. I found an apartment in Cambridge with 2 roommates, established a routine that included weekly dinners with Grandma Elaine, and maintained cordial but distant relations with my parents. I showed up for holiday gatherings and occasional Sunday dinners, listened to endless stories about Haley's college adventures at NYU, and accepted that our family dynamic would likely never change. Haley and I developed our own tenuous relationship as young adults. She wasn't malicious, just accustomed to being the center of attention. When we spent time together without our parents, glimpses of genuine connection emerged. She was studying communications and theater, forever changing her career goals, while our parents funded each new passion. Meanwhile, I steadily advanced in my career, managing increasingly complex environmental impact assessments for construction projects throughout New England. By 28, I had been promoted twice, started building my retirement accounts, and was considering buying my own condo. I made several attempts to address the imbalance with my parents. Once, after a particularly one-sided Christmas, where Haley received twice as many gifts, despite us both being adults with jobs, I gently pointed out the disparity. "You're just more practical, honey," Mom said. "Haley appreciates the little things more. You've always been focused on the bigger picture." The conversation went nowhere, as they twisted my observation into another supposed virtue that justified their neglect. Dad added, "When you have kids of your own someday, you'll understand that different children need different things." I stopped trying to make them see. Instead, I focused on building a life rich with people who showed up consistently, friends who remembered my birthday without reminders, colleagues who valued my contributions, and Grandma Elaine who loved me without condition. What I didn't realize was that the ultimate test of our family dynamic was about to arrive in the form of a shattered tibia and a sister's college orientation. The Mount Monadnock Trail in southern New Hampshire isn't particularly dangerous by serious hiking standards, but any rocky path can become treacherous in the wrong conditions. I had organized the weekend trip with 5 colleagues to celebrate completing a major environmental impact assessment that had earned our firm considerable praise. After months of 60-hour weeks, we deserved some fresh air and mountain views. Saturday morning dawned clear and crisp in early September. We arrived at the trailhead around 9, the parking lot already filling with fellow hikers, eager to enjoy one of the last warm weekends before fall fully settled in. We chose the White Dot Trail, considered moderately difficult but manageable for our mixed experience group. "Race you to the top," Madison joked Ethan, our team's geologist, as we began our ascent. I laughed. "Not a chance. I'm here for the journey, not just the destination." The first hour passed pleasantly as we climbed through forest that gradually gave way to exposed rock face. The conversation flowed easily between work stories and personal anecdotes. As the tree line receded and the views expanded, we stopped frequently for photos and water breaks. It happened just past the halfway point. A section of trail crossed a series of granite ledges still slick from overnight rain. I was leading our group, pointing out a red-tailed hawk circling above, when my right foot slipped on a patch of wet lichen. The world tilted suddenly. There was no time to correct my balance. One moment I was standing, the next I was falling backward, sliding down a rock face and then tumbling down a small ravine alongside the trail. The pain was immediate and breathtaking. I heard someone shouting my name as I came to rest against a boulder, my right leg twisted beneath me at an impossible angle. The searing agony told me immediately this wasn't a simple sprain. When I tried to move, the white-hot flash of pain caused me to vomit. "Don't move, Madison. We're coming down to you," Amber, our environmental technician and a certified wilderness first responder, was already carefully navigating the slope. The next 2 hours blurred together. Amber stabilized my leg using hiking poles and jackets while Ethan called emergency services. The park rangers arrived with a rescue team and the complicated process of extricating me from the ravine began. Each movement, despite their care, sent waves of agony through my body. By the time they loaded me into the ambulance, I was drifting in and out of consciousness from pain and the morphine they'd administered. In one lucid moment, I asked Amber to call my parents and Grandma Elaine. At Monadnock Community Hospital's emergency department, X-rays confirmed what I already suspected, a complex tibial fracture that would require surgery. The orthopedic surgeon on call, Dr. Patel, explained that I had a comminuted fracture with several bone fragments that would need to be realigned and secured with plates and screws. "We'll need to operate tonight," she explained. "The good news is that with proper surgery and physical therapy, you should regain full functionality. But the recovery will take months, and you'll need significant help during the first few weeks." Amber sat beside my bed, her normally cheerful face drawn with concern. "I called your parents and grandmother. Your grandma is arranging transportation since she doesn't drive anymore. Your parents said they're on their way." Relief washed over me. Despite our complicated relationship, I needed my family now. This wasn't a missed birthday or school event. This was serious. They would come through this time. While waiting for surgery prep, I called my parents directly. Mom answered, and I could hear activity in the background. "Madison, are you okay?" Amber told us what happened. "I'm going into surgery tonight." I explained, my voice tight with pain despite medication. "Doctor says recovery will be months. I'm scared, Mom." There was a pause, then muffled conversation I couldn't make out. Dad came on the line. "Listen, sweetheart, we're in a bit of a situation here. Haley's orientation at Dartmouth starts tomorrow morning, and we're already halfway to New Hampshire. You know how important this is for her future." I couldn't process what I was hearing. "Dad, I'm already in New Hampshire. I'm going into surgery. The doctor says I'll need help for weeks afterward." "Madison," Mom's voice, "now you've always been so independent and capable. Haley needs us for this transition. She's nervous about starting her graduate program." "And I'm nervous about surgery." My voice broke. A nurse looked over with concern. "You'll heal, honey," Dad said in his practical banking voice. "But your sister's future is time-sensitive. This orientation only happens once. We can visit you afterward." The betrayal felt physical, another breaking inside me. "So you're choosing her orientation over my surgery?" "Don't frame it like that," Mom scolded. "We're not choosing. We're just prioritizing time-sensitive needs. Your friends are there, and the hospital staff will take excellent care." Before I could respond, Haley's voice came through, distant but clear enough. "Mom, can we stop for coffee? I need to be alert for the campus tour." "We need to go, Madison," Dad said. "We'll call to check on you tomorrow after the welcome ceremony." The call ended. I stared at the phone in my hand, tears streaming down my face. Amber, who had stepped away during the call, returned to find me sobbing. "Madison, what happened?" "They're not coming," I whispered. "Haley's graduate school orientation is more important." Amber's expression shifted from confusion to outrage. "Are you serious? You're having emergency surgery." The nurse who had been monitoring me, Jessica, according to her name tag, shook her head in disbelief. "Honey, is there someone else we can call for you?" "My grandmother, but she's 82 and doesn't drive. She's trying to find a way here." Jessica squeezed my hand. "We'll take good care of you, I promise." An hour later, as they were preparing to take me to the operating room, my phone pinged with a notification. It was an Instagram post from my mother, a smiling selfie of my parents and Haley in front of Dartmouth's Baker Library. The caption read, "So proud of our baby girl starting her master's journey number. Proud parents number, Dartmouth grad number, new beginnings." They hadn't even mentioned my accident. Not a word about their other daughter lying in a hospital bed about to undergo surgery. I handed my phone to Amber, who glanced at it and swore under her breath. "This is not okay, Madison. This is so far from okay." As they wheeled me towards surgery, something crystallized inside me. The anesthesiologist was explaining the procedure, but my mind was elsewhere, cataloging years of similar moments, smaller betrayals that had accumulated like sediment building, the foundation for this ultimate abandonment. I had always made excuses for them, always rationalized their behavior, always been the understanding one, always prioritized family harmony over my own needs. No more. As the anesthesia began to take effect, I made a promise to myself through the haze. This would be the last time they hurt me. The last time I accepted crumbs of attention and called it love. I didn't yet know how, but I would ensure they finally understood the consequences of treating me as an afterthought. When I woke hours later in the recovery room, the physical pain was intense, but it paled compared to the emotional wound now fully exposed. My parents had shown me exactly where I stood in their priorities. Now it was time for me to show them exactly what that meant for our future. I spent 5 days in the hospital instead of the expected 3. Complications from surgery, a minor infection, and concerning blood pressure drops extended my stay. During this time, my support system revealed itself with perfect clarity, but not in the way I'd expected. My colleagues rotated visits, bringing books, magazines, and updates from work. Amber took personal days to help coordinate my initial recovery plan. My boss sent a massive fruit basket and assured me my position was secure, telling me to focus solely on healing. Grandma Elaine arrived on the second day, having convinced her neighbor Franklin to drive her the hour and a half to the hospital. At 82, she couldn't physically help much, but her presence provided the emotional anchor I desperately needed. "I gave your mother a piece of my mind," she told me, her thin hands clutching mine. "I raised her better than this." My parents, meanwhile, called once daily with brief, distracted conversations. They visited on day 4 for exactly 47 minutes, bringing a small plant and nervous energy. Haley sent a text with a sad face emoji, "And get better soon, sis." While the physical pain was substantial, the enforced stillness gave me time to think with unusual clarity. Something fundamental had shifted inside me. The fracture in my leg had exposed the fractures in my family relationships that could no longer be ignored or minimized. On the morning before discharge, I was updating my medical forms when something caught my attention. Despite being 28 with my own established life, I was still listed as my parents' emergency contact on several forms. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was their emergency contact, but they couldn't be bothered to be present for my emergency. This realization triggered a cascade of memories about other connections that remained between us. I was still the beneficiary on their life insurance policies and retirement accounts, a fact I knew from helping Dad organize his financial documents last year. I was a co-signer on the family vacation property at Lake Winnipesaukee, a small cabin purchased when I was 22, and had just started my career. Most significantly, I managed the investment account that funded Haley's tuition for her master's program, a responsibility I had taken on 2 years ago when Dad complained about the complexity of the portfolio. I had remained deeply integrated in my family's practical affairs, even as they kept me emotionally at arm's length. I was good enough to handle responsibilities, but not important enough to receive care in crisis. The imbalance was suddenly glaringly obvious. "You look like you're plotting something," Grandma Elaine observed, returning from the cafeteria with tea. "I'm just realizing some things about boundaries," I replied. She settled into the chair beside my bed. "It's about time. Want to tell me what you're thinking?" Over the next hour, I shared my observations about the financial and practical entanglements that remained between my parents and me despite the emotional distance. "I've been functioning as their safety net and administrator, while being treated as an afterthought," I concluded. Grandma Elaine nodded slowly. "Your grandfather, God rest his soul, had a saying, 'People treat you how you allow them to treat you.' He wasn't entirely right, but there's some truth there. You've allowed your parents to take without giving back for a very long time." "I thought that's what family did," I said quietly. "Support each other without keeping score." "That only works when everyone operates in good faith," she replied, her voice gentle but firm. "When the giving only goes one way, it's not family support, it's exploitation." During my remaining hospital time and the first week at Grandma Elaine's house, where I went for initial recovery since my third-floor apartment wasn't compatible with crutches and a wheelchair, I began documenting the pattern of imbalance. I created a spreadsheet of events my parents had missed versus those they'd attended for Haley. I noted financial responsibilities I'd taken on versus support I'd received. I reviewed text messages and emails that demonstrated the pattern. The evidence was overwhelming, and seeing it compiled, I felt equal parts vindicated and foolish for having accepted it for so long. Julia, my therapist friend who visited regularly during my recovery, reviewed my documentation, and whistled low. Madison, this isn't just occasional oversight, this is a consistent pattern of emotional neglect. What would you recommend to a client in my situation? I asked her. She thought for a moment. I'd recommend they establish clear boundaries with measurable consequences, not as punishment but as self-protection. That conversation with Julia became the blueprint for what followed. This wasn't about revenge, though I can't deny the term had crossed my mind in darker moments. This was about recalibrating a severely unbalanced relationship and protecting myself from further harm. I consulted with my friend Derek, a financial advisor, about my legal options regarding the various accounts and responsibilities I managed for my family. You're not legally obligated to continue managing their investments, he confirmed. As for the vacation property, you could request to be removed as cosigner, though that might require refinancing on their part. Armed with this information, I began drafting a comprehensive plan during my long hours of enforced rest. The strategy wasn't to hurt my parents or deprive Haley. It was to create a clear demonstration of my value by systematically removing the support they had taken for granted. Throughout this planning period, my parents remained largely absent. They called occasionally with distracted conversations that quickly turned to Haley's adjustment to graduate school. They visited once more, bringing grocery store flowers and staying just long enough to fulfill their obligation before citing a dinner reservation they couldn't miss. Grandma Elaine watched their departure with a sad shake of her head. Your mother was raised better than this. I don't know where I went wrong with her. You didn't, I assured her. Their choices are their own. One afternoon, about 3 weeks into my recovery, Grandma Elaine shared family history that illuminated much about our dynamics. Your mother was the baby of our family too, she explained. Her older brother Thomas was brilliant but troubled, addiction issues that consumed much of our attention. Your mother learned that creating small dramas would pull focus her way. I see the same pattern with Haley. And I'm like Uncle Thomas, the one expected to handle everything alone, I asked. No, sweetheart. Thomas failed because we overhelped him. You've succeeded despite being underhelped. That's the tragedy here. This conversation solidified my resolve. The pattern wouldn't change unless I forced the issue. My parents had shown me exactly where I stood in their priorities. Now it was time they understood exactly what that would mean for our future relationship. With clarity of purpose and Derek's professional guidance, I finalized my plan. The implementation would begin once I returned to my own apartment and could access all necessary documents and accounts. The timeline was set, the boundaries were clear. For the first time in my life, I would demand the respect I deserved, not through pleas or explanations that had failed in the past, but through clear demonstration of my value by its sudden absence. 6 weeks after the surgery, I was cleared to return to my apartment with modified work arrangements. My company allowed me to work remotely 3 days a week while I continued physical therapy and recovery. The metal hardware in my leg was a constant reminder of both physical and emotional pain, but it also became a symbol of reconstruction. Both my body and my boundaries were being rebuilt with stronger material. My first strategic action was scheduling a meeting with my family's financial advisor, Raymond Goldstein. I'd known Ray since I was 24 when I first began helping with family financial matters. He greeted me warmly at his downtown office, concern evident as he noted my crutches. Madison, good to see you recovering. Your father mentioned your accident. Nasty business with hiking, was it? I noted the vague awareness. My father had mentioned my accident, not detailed the severity or expressed significant concern. Complex tibial fracture requiring surgical reconstruction, I clarified. I'll be in physical therapy for months. Ray winced sympathetically. Terrible timing with your sister starting graduate school too. Family resources stretched thin, I imagine. That's partly why I'm here, I replied, maintaining a professional tone. I need to recalibrate some financial arrangements. Over the next hour, I methodically untangled myself from family financial responsibilities. I transferred management of Haley's education fund directly to my parents, removing myself as the account administrator. I set up automated notifications for any financial decisions involving accounts where my name appeared. I documented everything meticulously, ensuring all changes were legal and properly recorded. Your parents have relied heavily on your financial acumen, Ray noted, looking slightly concerned. Are you sure about these changes? I'm sure they can manage, I replied. After all, I need to focus on my recovery now. Ray nodded, though his expression suggested he understood more than I was explicitly stating. I'll inform them of these changes during our quarterly review next week. Thank you. I'd appreciate if you mentioned that these adjustments reflect my need to simplify responsibilities during recovery. My next step was addressing the vacation property at Lake Winnipesaukee. I contacted the bank holding the mortgage and requested removal as cosigner. This would require my parents to refinance, but given my father's position at a bank, this shouldn't present significant hardship, merely inconvenience, and perhaps a slightly higher interest rate without my excellent credit. Score on the application. With the financial recalibration underway, I turned to establishing physical and emotional distance. I declined the next family Sunday dinner with a simple text, still managing pain and mobility issues. Can't make it this week. When my mother pushed with, "We could pick you up," I responded with clarity, "I need quiet recovery time. We'll let you know when I'm up for family gatherings again." I set up auto responses to their messages. "Thanks for your note. I'm focusing on recovery and limiting communications. We'll respond within 48 to 72 hours. This created a buffer that allowed me to engage on my terms, rather than jumping to attention whenever they decided to acknowledge my existence. These small boundaries immediately revealed how accustomed my parents had become to my constant availability. My mother called 3 times after receiving my auto response, leaving increasingly concerned voicemails. My father sent an email asking if I was upset about something. Neither directly acknowledged the potential connection to their absence during my medical crisis. Meanwhile, I focused on strengthening relationships with people who had demonstrated genuine care. My colleagues who had visited the hospital became regular dinner guests as I regained mobility. Julia, my therapist friend, connected me with a support group for adult children of emotionally neglectful parents. Through this group, I met others with similar experiences who provided validation and strategies. Most significantly, I deepened my relationship with Grandma Elaine, visiting her 3 times weekly and helping arrange updates to her apartment that would allow her to age in place more safely. The time with her became a healing balm, showing me what family support should feel like. "You seem different," she observed one afternoon, as we sorted through old family photographs, "more settled in yourself." "I'm learning that respect comes from boundaries, not endless accommodation," I replied. She smiled. "It's a lesson I wish I'd learned earlier in life. Your grandfather and I might have had an easier time of it." 3 weeks into my boundary setting, my parents made an unexpected visit to Grandma Elaine's house while I was there for Sunday tea. They arrived unannounced, bringing forced cheerfulness and an obvious agenda. "We've barely seen you," Mom complained, settling onto the sofa uninvited. "And Ray mentioned you've made some changes to the financial arrangements." "We're planning the summer vacation at the lake house," Dad added. "Need you to look over some options for the boat rental like you usually do." I noted they hadn't asked a single question about my recovery or physical therapy progress. Their focus remained entirely on what I could do for them. Actually, Haley chimed in, having accompanied them. "I'm having some issues with my department advisor. Could you help me draft an email that doesn't sound confrontational but gets my point across?" The familiar dynamic played out before me, their assumption of my availability, their casual requests for assistance without reciprocal support, their complete disregard for my current limitations. In the past, I would have accommodated all these requests while suppressing my resentment. Not today. "I'm not available for any of those things," I said calmly. "I'm still recovering from major surgery and focusing on my own needs right now." The stunned silence that followed confirmed how rarely I had prioritized myself. My mother recovered first. "Madison, don't be difficult. Family helps family." "Exactly," I replied. "That's what I needed 6 weeks ago in the hospital." "Where were you then?" The direct question hung in the air, creating visible discomfort. My father shifted in his seat while my mother's smile became fixed. "We've already discussed that," Dad said dismissively. "You know Haley's orientation was time-sensitive. And apparently my emergency surgery wasn't. I observed. That's fine. You made your priorities clear. Now I'm making mine clear as well." The tension escalated as they realized I wasn't going to fall back into established patterns. Their reactions ranged from confusion to indignation to outright anger as they grasped that something fundamental had changed. "We need to have a real conversation about all this," I concluded. "But not here, not now. I'll set up a time next week when we can discuss the path forward for our family relationships." As they left, their expressions reflected dawning awareness that the daughter they had taken for granted was no longer accepting scraps of attention and calling it love. The ground had shifted beneath them, and for once, they were the ones struggling to find stable footing. I chose a private room at a neutral location, a small conference space at the local library, for our family meeting. The setting was intentional, public enough to discourage extreme emotional outbursts, but private enough for honest conversation. I arrived early to arrange the seating and prepare my materials, including the documentation I had compiled. Grandma Elaine insisted on attending as both support and witness. "I've enabled this dynamic too, by not speaking up more forcefully over the years," she admitted. "It's time we all faced the truth." My parents arrived precisely on time, their expressions, a mixture of confusion and defensiveness. Haley came too, though I hadn't specifically invited her. Her presence was actually beneficial. This wasn't just about my relationship with our parents, but about the entire family dynamic. "Thank you for coming," I began formally once everyone was seated. "I've asked for this meeting because we need to address long-standing patterns in our family that came to a head during my recent medical emergency." My father immediately attempted to control the narrative. "Madison, if this is still about the orientation timing, you're being unreasonable. We've already explained the situation." "This isn't just about the orientation," I replied steadily. "That was simply the clearest example of a pattern that's existed my entire life. Today I want to share my perspective with evidence, and then discuss how we move forward." I had prepared a simple presentation on my tablet, which I now displayed on the room's small screen. The first slide showed a timeline of significant events in my life, juxtaposed with Haley's along with parental attendance records. "Over the past 15 years, you've attended 97% of Haley's events and 34% of mine. When conflicts arose, my events were sacrificed 100% of the time." My mother shifted uncomfortably. "That can't be accurate." "It is," Grandma Elaine interjected quietly. "I kept my own records because I attended what they missed." I continued through my presentation, methodically showing patterns of emotional support, financial assistance, and practical help, all heavily skewed toward Haley. I presented text message exchanges, emails, and calendar entries that documented the imbalance. I included financial records showing my contributions to family stability alongside the minimal support I'd received. The hospital incident wasn't an anomaly, I concluded. It was the logical extension of a pattern where my needs are consistently deemed less important. Throughout my presentation, my parents' expressions shifted from defensive to uncomfortable to genuinely shocked as the evidence mounted. Haley stared at the floor, occasionally glancing up with a pained expression. "We had no idea you felt this way," my mother finally said, her voice small. "That's not accurate," I countered, gently, but firmly. "I've expressed these concerns multiple times over the years. Each time my feelings were dismissed or explained away. What's different now is that I'm no longer accepting the dismissal." My father, ever the pragmatist, tried to reframe the situation. "Every family has different dynamics, Madison. We never meant to make you feel less important." "Impact matters more than intent," I replied, using a phrase I'd learned in therapy. "And the impact has been harmful." I then outlined how my injury and their response had affected me physically and emotionally. I described the fear of going into surgery without family support, the humiliation of explaining their absence to concerned medical staff, and the profound loneliness of recovery without their presence. "The nurse who cared for me after surgery showed more concern in 24 hours than you demonstrated in 6 weeks," I said, my voice finally betraying emotion. "She was a stranger who understood basic human compassion better than my own parents." My mother began crying quietly. My father stared at his clasped hands. Haley looked stricken. I didn't realize, she whispered. I was so caught up in my orientation. I should've. I cut her off gently. This isn't primarily about you, Haley. You've been responding to the dynamic our parents created. This is about patterns established long before either of us had any control. I then moved to the final part of my presentation, the consequences and conditions. I've already implemented several changes, I explained, outlining the financial restructuring and boundary setting I'd established. I've removed myself as co-signer on the Lake House transferred management of Haley's education fund directly to you and withdrawn from the family investment advisory role. My father looked up sharply. That explains the calls from the mortgage company. Madison, those changes create significant complications for us. I understand, I acknowledged. Just as my injury created significant complications for me, complications I faced largely alone. The parallel hung in the air between us. Moving forward, I'm setting clear conditions for my participation in this family, I continued. I'm not cutting contact, but I am fundamentally changing how I engage. I outlined my boundaries: no more automatic availability, no more unbalanced giving, no more accepting disregard for my needs. I would attend family gatherings only when emotionally prepared, and would leave if old patterns emerged. I would no longer manage family logistics, finances, or problem-solving unless reciprocal support was demonstrated consistently. These aren't punishments, I clarified. They're self-protection and necessary rebalancing. The silence following my presentation was profound. My parents seemed genuinely stunned by the comprehensive evidence and clear consequences. Their shock revealed how deeply they had normalized the imbalance, so much so that its clear documentation appeared revelatory rather than confirmatory. I don't know what to say, my mother finally managed. We never intended. Again, impact over intent, I reminded her. What matters now is whether you're willing to acknowledge the pattern and commit to change. My father, ever solution-oriented, asked, What exactly do you want from us, Madison? Equal consideration, reciprocal support, acknowledgement of my value beyond what I can do for the family, and most importantly, accountability when you fall short. Because patterns don't change overnight. The discussion that followed was difficult but necessary. My parents alternated between defensiveness and genuine remorse. Haley mostly listened occasionally, offering insights about how she'd benefited from and been limited by her role as the family favorite. Grandma Elaine provided historical context, helping my parents connect their behavior to patterns in their own upbringing. Elizabeth, she said to my mother, you're repeating what your father did, focusing on the squeaky wheel while taking the reliable one for granted. By the meeting's end, no magical transformation had occurred, but something important had shifted. My parents left with a new awareness they couldn't unsee, and practical consequences they couldn't ignore. For the first time, I had spoken my truth without softening it to protect their feelings, and for the first time they had truly heard me. As we gathered our things to leave, Haley approached me tentatively. I never saw it before, she admitted. But looking at your presentation, it's so obvious. I'm sorry, Madison. It wasn't your responsibility to see it, I told her. But I appreciate that you do now. The confrontation wasn't an ending, but a beginning. The first step toward either rebuilding our family on healthier terms or accepting its limitations and adjusting my expectations accordingly. Either way, I had finally claimed my worth in a language they couldn't ignore or dismiss. The weeks following our confrontation brought predictable turbulence. My parents cycled through various stages of response: initial defensiveness, giving way to anger, then to bargaining, and finally to the beginnings of genuine reflection. Their first reaction was to recruit allies. My mother called extended family members, presenting a carefully edited version of events that cast me as suddenly unreasonable. Madison's accident has changed her, she told my Aunt Caroline. She's making all these accusations about favoritism and withdrawing from family responsibilities. This backfired when several relatives, including Aunt Caroline, responded with variations of, well, you did miss her surgery for Haley's orientation. That seems pretty clear-cut. My father took a different approach, attempting to minimize my financial disentanglement. "These changes are causing us real difficulties, Madison," he complained during a phone call. "The lake house refinancing is increasing our monthly payment by $200. "I understand that's challenging," I replied calmly. "Just as recovering from surgery without family support was challenging for me." His silence acknowledged the parallel I'd drawn. Haley's response surprised me most. After our family meeting, she requested lunch just between us, our first one-on-one conversation in months. We met at a small cafe near my apartment, her usual confident demeanor replaced by uncharacteristic nervousness. "I've been thinking about everything you showed us," she began, fidgeting with her napkin. "At first I was defensive, like you were attacking me for being the favorite. But then I started remembering things differently, like when you won that engineering scholarship and Mom and Dad barely mentioned it because I had drama club issues that week. That's exactly the pattern I confirmed. The thing is," she continued hesitantly, "being the favorite isn't actually great either. I never developed your independence or confidence. I still call Mom about everything because I never had to figure things out myself. Your presentation made me realize I'm 25 with the coping skills of a teenager." This perspective shift opened a new dimension in our relationship. For the first time, we discussed the family dynamic as adults, examining how it had shaped us both, me into hyper-independence, her into prolonged dependence. This conversation marked the beginning of a more authentic sister relationship, one based on mutual understanding rather than competition for parental attention. Grandma Elaine remained my steadfast supporter throughout this period. "Your mother's angry because you've held up a mirror she doesn't want to look into," she observed during one of our regular visits. "But I've noticed she's starting to ask questions about her own childhood. That's progress." Indeed, about a month after our confrontation, my parents began showing small signs of accountability. It started with my father, who had always been more practically minded. "I've been reviewing our calendar from the past few years," he admitted during a brief visit to drop off mail that had been delivered to their house. "The attendance disparity you documented, it's accurate. I just never saw the pattern before." My mother took longer to acknowledge reality. Her breakthrough came during a challenging family therapy session that I had agreed to attend after they requested it. "I think," she said slowly, tears streaming down her face, "I've been recreating my own childhood dynamic. My parents always focused on my brother's problems while expecting me to just handle everything on my own. I resented it so much, and yet I did the exact same thing to you, Madison." This moment of self-awareness didn't instantly repair our relationship, but it opened the door to genuine change. The therapy sessions continued, sometimes productive, sometimes frustratingly circular. My parents would make progress, then slip back into old patterns, then recognize their regression and try again. 3 months into this family reconstruction process, a minor health scare with my father created an unexpected opportunity for new patterns to emerge. He required a routine outpatient procedure but needed someone to drive him home afterward. In the past, I would have automatically rearranged my schedule to help regardless of the impact on my work or personal commitments. This time I assessed honestly. I had an important project deadline that day that couldn't be moved. "I can't drive you that day," I told him directly, "but I can help arrange another solution if you need." Instead of the guilt trip I might have received in the past, my father simply said, "I understand. Your work is important. I'll ask Uncle Robert." This small exchange represented significant progress, my needs and commitments being respected rather than dismissed, and my father finding solutions rather than expecting me to sacrifice. By the 6-month mark after our confrontation, our family dynamics had shifted noticeably. The changes weren't dramatic or perfect, but they were meaningful. My parents began checking before assuming my availability for family events. At event, they showed interest in my career and recovery, without immediately pivoting to Haley's activities. When they slipped into old patterns, they caught themselves more quickly, or accepted my gentle reminders. Haley and I developed a relationship independent of our parents, meeting regularly for coffee, and gradually building genuine sisterly connection. The most significant moment came during a family gathering to celebrate Grandma Elaine's birthday. As gifts were being opened, my mother suddenly seemed to realize something. She disappeared into the guest room and returned with a small wrapped package. "This is late," she said, handing it to me. About 16 years late, actually. Inside was a silver bracelet with a small charm shaped like a microscope. I looked at her questioningly. "When you won the state science fair in 8th grade," she explained, her voice thick with emotion. "We missed it for Haley's soccer tournament. I bought this to give you, but then, I don't know, time passed and it seemed too late, and eventually I just put it away. I'm sorry, Madison. I really am." The bracelet wasn't valuable in monetary terms, but the acknowledgment it represented was priceless. For the first time, my mother had fully recognized a specific moment of favoritism and taken concrete action to address it, however belatedly. I slipped the bracelet on. "Thank you for remembering," I said simply. That evening, as we gathered around Grandma Elaine's dining table, I observed our family with new eyes. We weren't transformed into a perfectly balanced unit. Decades of patterns couldn't dissolve in 6 months. But we were learning a new way of relating that made space for everyone's needs and contributions. My father raised his glass in a toast to Grandma Elaine, to the wisest among us who saw what the rest of us missed for too long. His eyes met mine briefly, acknowledging the double meaning in his words. The road ahead would still hold challenges and regressions, but for the first time, I felt cautiously optimistic that our family could rebuild on a foundation of mutual respect rather than unbalanced expectations. 1 year after my accident, I stood at the summit of Mount Monadnock, gazing across the landscape that had changed the course of my life. The physical journey back to this spot had been arduous. Months of physical therapy, gradual strength building, and overcoming the psychological fear of returning to the place where I'd been so severely injured. My right leg, now healed but forever marked by surgical scars and internal hardware, ached dully from the climb. The physical reminder of my injury would likely always remain, just as the emotional scars had healed but left their own marks on my psyche. The past year had been transformative in ways I couldn't have imagined as I lay in that hospital bed, abandoned and hurt. My recovery journey had paralleled my emotional journey, painful, nonlinear, requiring both professional help and personal determination, and ultimately leading to greater strength than I had possessed before. Physical therapy had taught me to accept help when needed, a profound lesson for someone who had built her identity around self-sufficiency. My therapist, Devin, had patiently guided me through exercises while encouraging me to vocalize pain rather than stoically endure it. "Asking for help isn't weakness," he reminded me regularly. "It's human connection." This philosophy extended beyond physical recovery into my emotional life. I learned to identify needs and express them directly rather than silently meeting everyone else's needs while neglecting my own. I practiced accepting support from worthy sources while maintaining boundaries with those who had proven unreliable. My friendship circle deepened and expanded during this period. Colleagues who had shown up during crisis became close friends. My support group for adult children of emotionally neglectful parents provided community with others who truly understood the unique pain of being overlooked rather than overtly abused. Most significantly, I created personal traditions that centered my own joy, rather than revolving around family obligation. I celebrated achievements with friends who genuinely cheered my success. I took solo travel adventures to places I'd always wanted to explore. I redesigned my apartment to reflect my preferences rather than accommodating constant family visitors. These changes reflected a fundamental shift in my relationship with myself, from someone who derived worth primarily from utility to others, to someone whose intrinsic value existed independent of what I could provide. My family relationships continued their slow evolution toward healthier dynamics. Progress wasn't linear. Old patterns occasionally reasserted themselves during holidays or times of stress. The difference now was that I clearly identified these regressions and held firm boundaries rather than accommodating for the sake of false harmony. My parents gradually adapted to our recalibrated relationship. My father, the more pragmatic of the two, adjusted more quickly to the new reality. He began consulting me as an equal about financial matters rather than assigning me responsibilities without authority. He expressed genuine interest in my career and recovery without immediately pivoting to Haley's activities. Most importantly, he acknowledged when he slipped into old patterns and made visible efforts to correct course. "I'm trying to see you clearly," he told me during a conversation 6 months after our confrontation. "Not just as the capable daughter who handles everything, but as Madison with her own needs and dreams." My mother's journey was more emotionally complex. Her identity had been built around her particular style of mothering, and recognizing its harmful aspects threatened her self-perception. Therapy helped her connect her treatment of me to her own childhood experiences of being simultaneously neglected and expected to excel. "I think," she admitted during a particularly honest conversation, "I resented your independence because I never had the chance to develop my own. I was always taking care of everyone else." This insight didn't excuse her behavior but helped explain the multi-generational pattern at work. Breaking this cycle became important to both of us. Haley and I developed a relationship based on mutual respect rather than competition for parental attention. As she worked through her own therapeutic process, she gained insight into how being the favored child had limited her growth. "I never developed your resilience," she observed during one of our now regular sister lunches. "Every obstacle was removed for me, so I never learned to overcome anything on my own." We began supporting each other's growth in ways our parents never facilitated. She attending my environmental engineering presentations, me helping her navigate graduate school challenges without solving everything for her. The first Thanksgiving after my accident became a watershed moment in our family reconstruction. I hosted at my apartment, setting clear boundaries about timing and expectations. My parents arrived with appropriate contributions rather than last-minute demands. Haley helped with preparation instead of expecting service. Grandma Elaine watched with quiet satisfaction as we navigated this holiday with new awareness. "You've changed the pattern for generations to come," she told me privately, as we washed dishes. "Even if you never have children of your own, you've shown Haley a different way that she'll carry forward." Professionally, my recovery period ultimately strengthened my career. The necessary accommodations during healing led to flexible work arrangements that improved my productivity and satisfaction. My company's support during crisis built loyalty that translated to greater commitment once I returned fully. Most significantly, the confidence I gained from establishing boundaries in my personal life extended to professional assertiveness that led to a significant promotion. My boss, Stephanie, noted this change during my performance review. "You've always been excellent technically, Madison, but this past year you've developed leadership presence. You advocate for yourself and your team with clarity and conviction." This growth extended into my personal relationships as well. 6 months after my accident, I met Daniel, an architectural engineer who specialized in sustainable building design. Our relationship developed slowly and thoughtfully, built on honest communication and mutual respect, rather than the caretaking dynamic I had unconsciously sought in previous relationships. "What I admire most about you," Daniel told me one evening, "is how clearly you know your own worth. You don't need me to validate you, you choose to be with me, because it adds to an already complete life." As I stood on that mountain summit a year after my fall, I reflected on the wisdom gained through this difficult journey. The broken leg had forced me to stop running on autopilot and examine patterns I had accepted as unchangeable. The abandonment had clarified which relationships deserved my investment and which required firm boundaries. The recovery had taught me that healing is never just physical but encompasses mind, heart, and soul. Most profoundly, I had learned that love should never require the sacrifice of dignity. Real love makes space for all participants to have needs, to express pain, to set limits. The family pattern I had accepted for decades wasn't love in its healthiest form, it was a dysfunctional system that diminished all of us in different ways. Setting boundaries wasn't selfish but an act of love, for myself primarily but ultimately for my family too. By refusing to participate in harmful patterns, I offered them the opportunity to grow beyond limitation. Some took that opportunity more readily than others, but all were changed by the shift in dynamic. The patterns established over decades couldn't transform overnight, but they could evolve with consistent effort and clear consequences. The work wasn't finished, it might never be complete, but the trajectory had fundamentally changed. As I began my descent from the mountain, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for most of my life. The path forward wasn't perfectly clear, but I now possessed the tools and wisdom to navigate whatever challenges emerged. I had learned to define my own worth regardless of family narrative, to build connections based on reciprocity rather than obligation, and to recognize that sometimes the most loving action is simply to stand firm in your truth. What was your most profound realization about family dynamics or self-worth? Have you ever had to set difficult boundaries with loved ones? Share your experience in the comments below, and if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with someone who might need to hear it. Remember, your worth isn't determined by how much you give or sacrifice. It's inherent, unchangeable, and completely yours. Thank you for joining me on this journey of healing and growth.